The Senate is voting for the 13th time to end the shutdown, but it's expected to fail again. Officials are warning food assistance programs for low-income Americans are set to run out by the end of the week. Now, millions of Americans are questioning how they will get enough to eat. Let's bring in ABC's Jay O'Brien on Capitol Hill and business reporter Alexis Christoforous for more on that. So, Alexis, how big is the impact here if SNAP benefits run out?
It could be devastating. In fact, I saw this one quote from the CEO of Hunger Free America. He says, "We would have the greatest hunger catastrophe in this country since the Great Depression." When you look at the sheer numbers, Diane, about 42 million people on SNAP benefits, formerly known as food stamps. More than 62% of those live in households with children. 37% include older adults, people with disabilities, veterans. And a misconception here is that people on SNAP benefits don't work. A large number of them do. They're families that go out to work and try to make ends meet. So if this program were to just suddenly end, a lot of these people will not be getting their checks all of these people would not be getting their checks November 1st if the government doesn't do something about it. Could be devastating and would really put the strain on those states to try to fill the gap.
Jay, what's the latest on this vote?
So this vote is going to go down just like the rest of them did. It's going to fail because we haven't seen any meaningful change in the posture up here on Capitol Hill. Democrats are continuing to hold out here for an extension of Obamacare tax credits that are set to expire at the end of the year. And if they do expire, they could cause premiums for tens of millions of Americans, about 20 million people on the Affordable Care Act who get their insurance, rather, through the Affordable Care Act to expire. But Obamacare open enrollment is just a few days away, so the deadline's even closer than the end of the year. Republicans have said they're not going to negotiate on that while the government is actively shut down. But with each passing day, to Alexis's point, the impacts of this shutdown get worse and worse. And we are seeing SNAP just days away from drying up. There are about 42 million Americans who rely on SNAP to feed their families. And that is adding some additional pressure here on lawmakers. Even Republicans like Senator Josh Hawley have now put forward these additional bills that would try to fund SNAP while the government is actively shut down. It's unclear if Senate Republican leaders who control the floor would actually put that bill up for a vote. They have opposed similar kinds of legislation to kind of blunt the impacts of this shutdown in the past. But we've also brought a similar question on that topic to Democrats, saying at what point does the pain of this shutdown, tens of millions of Americans going hungry, outweigh this fight for health care that they say that they're waging here? And I just asked that question moments before we came on the air with you, with Connecticut Senator Richard Blumenthal, and he said he believes that it is, and I'm paraphrasing him here, a just fight for health care here. He believes that the American people are behind him. He called on Republicans to pass these kind of, again, ways of blunting the impacts of the shutdown, separate bills to pay federal workers, separate bills to fund SNAP, but also the cleanest way to fund this, Republicans say, is just to vote to fund the government, which Democrats are holding back because they want these serious health care concessions that they say are crucial for tens of millions of Americans.
Alexis, what can people who rely on those benefits do?
Look, there are local food banks and community food banks, church groups, synagogues. They're all coming together. A number of states, a handful of states have said, look, we're going to release some state funding to try to, fill this gap. It doesn't mean they're going to send people their SNAP benefit checks. It means they're going to go benefit, the food banks in that particular area. For California, for instance, said they're going to send in the National Guard to go work at the food banks to help give out food as they did during the pandemic. Virginia has declared a state of emergency and said SNAP benefits will be provided until the end of the shutdown. But that's really only one state that has so far been able to say that. We know that the Department of Agriculture has contingency funds, but they're saying they're not going to release them, that they legally cannot. They say they can only do that in times of disaster like a hurricane, a flood. Some may say this is a disaster with so many millions of people, about to lose their benefits. And one other thing I want to point out, other government programs that might, pick up the bill here if SNAP isn't around are not functioning right now because of the shutdown. So people who may have tried to save money with their electric bills with HEAP or trying to get money from something called the temporary cash assistance, those programs are either not up and running or severely delayed, Diane.
And Jay, meanwhile, House Republicans are claiming former President Biden's executive actions are null and void over his use of an auto pen. What's the latest on that investigation, and how's the Biden camp responding?
Yeah, so this was an investigation that called in those in President Biden's immediate inner circle, and it reviewed his cognitive stake while he was in office, and additionally his use of the auto pen. Now, House Republicans allege that his various executive actions, including pardons that use that auto pen, are, to use your words, null and void simply because they used the auto pen. Obviously, that's something that Democrats strongly push back against and point out the fact that presidents long before President Biden had used the auto pen for similar kinds of executive actions. Republicans have referred a number of witnesses, including President Biden's former doctor, to the Department of Justice because they pled the Fifth in their depositions with the House Oversight Committee. They've also asked the Attorney General to review this use of the auto pen and see if various executive actions would be voided because of it. The Biden camp is pushing back, saying that this is all based on baseless theories and that there is no proof of, as Republicans had alleged at the outset of this investigation, any kind of conspiracy in Biden world in the final months of that White House. Diane.
All right, Jay O'Brien, Alexis, Christoforous, thank you.